Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the thumbs up for the live feed. We're off and running. Welcome to the Communities Committee. Dive straight in to item 1, the minutes of the last meeting on the 3rd of November. Everybody happy with that? Any questions or comments? No? So they're approved then. Thank you. Item 2 is apologies for absence. Noel?
Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Daniel Williamson on medical sickness grounds, and substitution is by Councillor Francis Purdue-Horan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Francis. Item 3, declarations of interest by members and officers, which is 3A, disclosable pecuniary interests, and 3B, private interests. Thank you, Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Chairman. So a group that I work with sometimes works with the Eastwood People's Initiative, which is on the approval of applications to the Community Food Hub, item 6.
Thank you. Is that okay, Noel? Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thank you for that.
I don't know whether myself and John have to declare an interest because of Inspire. No, I didn't think it because we're from this committee anyway. But yeah.
Thanks, Clem. Okay, we'll move on then to item 4, which is the Nottingham's Archives Service overview. And I'm turning around looking at Peter on the screen. I see Ruth's with you as well. Welcome, Ruth. So over to you, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. So this report is an introductory report to the Nottinghamshire Archives Service. The report outlines the statutory and legal duties and the basis of the service. The service is delivered through the contract that the County Council has with Inspire Cultural Learning and Libraries, which continues to March 2026. The Archive Service is accredited to the National Archives, which is the national development body for archives, and that accreditation occurs every 3 years. The Archive Service in Nottinghamshire has been part of the service grouping with the Library Service since 1969. This means that the Archive Service, although based in Nottingham, serves through the library network, through the work that Ruth and her team do, and the provision of collections in libraries as well. It's a well-performing service, as outlined in the report. It's well respected regionally and nationally, has always done very well in terms of accreditation standards through, well, good leadership, I would say, good management, and also investment of the County Council in previous developments around the building. The service is also have a really good response and flexible, agile response to the pandemic conditions previously, and was able to move a lot of its services online to respond to need. So that's kind of the outline of the report. I'm going to hand over to Ruth Imerson, or introduce Ruth as well, who's our Heritage Services Manager. So Ruth has responsibility for the Archive Service, for the Modern Records Management Service, which is a service for the County Council, and also for heritage services delivered across the library network. So Ruth is going to provide an overview of the Archive Service today. We had an invitation for members to come and visit today to the Archive Service, which we have postponed. We will offer that again when we can. I would encourage you to take that opportunity up, because the Archive Service is a real gem, and I've been on the tour many times, and I always learn something new and get quite inspired by what you see. So I would encourage you, if you couldn't make it today, that it was something you take up in the future. So I'm going to hand over to Ruth, who's going to take you through a presentation. Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Peter. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. No, I am not allowed to share my presentation because I'm not an organiser or a presenter. So that's the first technical hitch. Oh, thank you. Just bear with me a moment whilst I make my presentation. So it should be coming up now. Is that okay? Good, thank you. Okay, so as Peter said, Nottinghamshire Archives is part of the Inspire family of services, which is delivered on behalf of Nottinghamshire County Council. We deliver from a building in Nottingham City where we've been since 1993. And the aim of the service is to inspire people to understand the place in which they live and to improve community cohesion, to help people understand how the history of their place can bring them together. And we want everyone to be able to access the best of Nottinghamshire and the best of its heritage. So Nottinghamshire Archives is your archive. It's the archive for the county. It was created by the people of Nottinghamshire for the people of Nottinghamshire. We have over 4 million documents spanning over 8 centuries. I like to say we have items which are older than the Magna Carta. We can go back to 1155. We have everything from 12th century deeds written by Richard the Lionheart and King John of Robin Hood fame, to stories of life in contemporary Nottinghamshire and the city of Nottingham as well. We cover everything from recreational cricket clubs to the mining industry to the extensive estate archives for Rufford Abbey. And the history we preserve is preserved on your behalf and the behalf of the citizens of the county, and it was created by kings, queens, bishops, and people just like you and people just like your constituents. As Peter mentioned, we are an accredited archive service. So the National Archives at Kew are our lead body within our sector, and as Peter said, we are checked every 3 years. So the accreditation service, it's the equivalent of Ofsted for the archive sector. So we have a wide and varied service offer, which fall into sort of 4 main categories. We have collections care, collections development, collections information, and our expanding online offer. So collections care is all about conservation and how we look after the documents on your behalf. We have specialist staff who understand how to look after paper and parchment. They can repair old documents, and they also do lots of preservation work. And that might be monitoring the strong rooms to ensure they're the right temperature, or it could be making bespoke boxes and wrapping, which is very, very important for the preservation of documents. We want the archives to be available in another 800 years. So we're a very long-term service. Our environmental strong rooms meet all of the current British standards. There are specific temperatures and humidity levels which maintain the collections. And we have a secure facility with security, as you might imagine, because some of the items are priceless. Collections information is all about cataloguing. It's helping people to understand what the documents are actually about, help them interpret, and it places documents in their context. So if we have photographs of an underground coal seam, it matters which colliery it was. And so we're very careful to record what we call the provenance of the documents, because we don't want to change or obscure our history. Collections development is all about documenting history. We still are actively collecting. Most of the things we're getting now are digital or paper documents from the Victorian period onwards, but we still see medieval deeds coming through our doors. And for our online picture archive, we are actively collecting. We now have an online system for collecting. So the performance of the service, every year the Archives and Records Association, in collaboration with CILIP, do a survey of visitors to British archives. And this alternates between a survey of physical visitors and virtual visitors. So the pandemic meant that some of these were postponed. So the most recent figures I have are for 2018. So 95% of the visitors that came through the door during the survey months said they were very satisfied or satisfied with the welcome they received from the staff and the support they got. 96% said they were inspired to find out more. 9.7 out of 10 said so the attitude of staff was rated 9.7 out of 10, as was the quality of staff advice. As you can imagine, we have people coming through the doors asking for everything from their school admission register to medieval history. So the staff need to be very good at signposting in the correct direction. And there was a 9.3 out of 10 overall satisfaction with the archive service overall. So the building, for those of you who've not been to our site, these are a photograph of the building. This is the new extension, which was done in 2015, and the internal photos are from the refurbishment that the council supported and funded. We have new strong rooms, new environmental controls, very early detection systems on our fire systems, new meeting rooms, and a completely refurbished public and office space, which obviously allows us to deliver our services in a much better way. Now, the easiest way to tell you about the collections is to show you some of them. So some of the photographs here from our 4 million documents, a photograph at the bottom left of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, to visit to Worksop, I believe. A map of Retford. The ladies in the middle at the top are the suffragettes of Mansfield, about to embark on the Great Pilgrimage to London in 1913. And the photograph underneath is a group of ladies who were protested against the enclosure of Selston Common. And so they decided to go and play a cricket match in their full Victorian dresses. And we have a photograph on the right of a cricket team playing within the county. So we use all of these documents and you patch them together to support the history that our researchers are trying to discover. Many of our items are of local significance. On the top left there, that is the launch of the NCC mobile library service with the original team. We have official photographs, the official history of the council. We also have the photograph on the right of elephants parading through Retford. Bottom left is a World War II era photograph of a group of American soldiers visiting a group in Ollerton. There's the Major Oak, which has to go in any presentation about the archives. And the bottom right is part of the development we introduced last year, where people could donate their photographs online. That is a photograph of the VE Day celebrations in Percy Street in Sutton in Ashfield, taken in May 2020. So we also have records of national significance. So the lady on the left is Dame Laura Knight, who was the court artist for the Nuremberg trials in the 1940s. And she was from the Nottingham area, which is why we have sketches of her and photographs of her actually from that era. And they are quite popular. It's quite a popular collection, quite a big significance. And the records of the Raleigh Cycle Company are very popular with our researchers. As you can imagine, there are lots of people still around who worked there. In 2016, we worked with a production company and provided content for their film Peddling Dreams, the Raleigh story, which was shown on BBC Radio, BBC 4. On the first day of showing, 400,000 people saw that film. So that's 400,000 people that saw your archives through their own television. So there's quite a lot of legislation underpinning the archive service. These are just some of the ones that are sort of most relevant to yourselves. So the Public Records Act enables us to look after records that were created by central government in localities. You're thinking of magistrate court records, hospital records. It's far better that they are here with us than down in Kew at the National Archives. It's much better. It means people from the community can access them. So we are a place of deposit on behalf of the National Archives. The Local Government Acts are those which allow, they underpin our provision to the County Council and the City Council. We are the official archive. We do actively collect and record the council's activities, including meetings, etc. And these were very useful during the ICSA inquiry, because we had a significant number of records that were used by that inquiry. The laws of property, the manorial records, and the Tithe Commutation Acts are important because they resulted in the deposit of very detailed tax records. As you can imagine, they were very detailed for obvious reasons, and it did mean that for all of the county of Nottinghamshire, we could tell you what sort of crop was grown in a field in this at the time that these records were created. So it's very sort of important legislation. The parochial registers measure allows us to be the formal archive for the diocese of Southall and Nottingham. So we hold all the records for the local diocese. So we will have the registers for your local churches. So our major depositors, and anybody can give records to us. We will look at them and determine whether they're of historic value. But our major depositors are the County Council itself, the City Council, Church of England, the Ministry of Justice, through the Magistrate Court records that we have. Rally Cycle Company is a good example of a large business that's deposited. The Baron Saville collection, which is the collection for Rufford Abbey going back to the 12th century. If you think of Rufford Abbey as an estate, there are records of the people that lived there, how much they were paid, how much was spent in the kitchen. So it's very comprehensive collection. We also keep records for the Department of Health and Social Care. So last year, when the pandemic hit, and like everybody else, we thought, how can we go online? How can we still deliver our service? And one of the things we did was to start a project called Lockdown Life, where people could send in their own photographs documenting what it was like to live in Nottingham and Nottinghamshire during lockdowns. And this is a particular poignant photograph, I think. The baby in the photograph was born on the 23rd of March 2020, which I think is a date none of us will ever forget. And the words here are from the mother of the baby. So, my beautiful healthy babe arrived in an unsafe world which had lost the normality known to previous generations. All I could do to keep him safe was what was unnatural, by closing the door to family and friends. So I think that's a very poignant example that does sum up the pandemic. It shows why it's important for us to preserve and maintain these records, because what happened yesterday is as important as what happened 800 years ago. So in addition to lots of photos of empty, deserted streets as well, we also had these two photographs. The lady on the left, it was the 21st birthday of her twin grandsons. So we've got this photograph of her showing the card through the window. And the photograph on the right is a socially distanced Mother's Day in 2020. So we're aiming to preserve the memories of how the communities strove to maintain their cohesion during the pandemic and how they all came together to support each other. Over 200 people donated through this project, which is still ongoing, and many who had never used the service before, which I think was particularly important for us. We engage with a lot of different groups. So we provide workshops and teaching sessions for postgraduates at the University of Nottingham and Nottingham-Trent. We've worked with the Colour of Love project, which examined mixed race relationships in Nottingham during the 70s and the 80s. We deliver project training in archive skills to a lot of groups that are funded by the Heritage Lottery Fund. So we will teach them how the archive works, etc. The Friends of Nottinghamshire Archives, who are very active at the moment, are helping us to catalogue the Savile collection, which is obviously the Rufford Abbey collection. And we provide support to the County Council on exhibitions for VE Day and the upcoming Platinum Jubilee as well. So the conservation, we have 2 conservators who specialise in bookbinding and paper and parchment. We also have a commercial service. At the moment, they are working on a 1st edition King James I Bible from 1611. It's a very rare, it belongs to Southern Minster. So we do work from that to work for local groups. We also can work on photographs, whether they be analogue or digital photographs. The items in the photo are bookbinders' tools used for lettering on leather. So we can bind in leather. So environmental conditions are very important to us. We have 5 miles of shelving now. We had 2 new strong rooms added to the building as part of the refurbishment. We also have a cool room which we use for photographs, which keeps them at 5 degrees centigrade. The digital storage is, digital records are much more fragile. If you think about the format obsolescence, if you think about that floppy disk that you can't use anymore, or the version of Microsoft Word from 10 years ago, which you can't open. So we have a digital preservation system which allows us to migrate documents to the more modern versions so that they're always available and we won't lose the actual data itself. So our online and digital offer, we have over 22,000 images on the Inspire Picture Archive. At the moment, it is completely free to browse. And we have 360,000 entries on our Nottinghamshire Archives online catalogue, which is the catalogue of the collections itself. Over the past 18 months, our home working volunteers added over 10,000 entries to that catalogue. And we have about 30 people who work from home helping us to do that. So the Inspire Picture Archive I've mentioned already. This is a snapshot from a couple of years ago, I think. All of those images on the front will lead through to a separate exhibition. So this is how we used this last year for the VE Day exhibition and for the VJ Day. And we also we're planning to use it for the Platinum Jubilee and to support Nottinghamshire Day as well for next year. So it's well worth having a look at that because there are it's updated all the time. So that was just a sort of quick overview of the archive service and what we did. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much, Ruth. It's a fascinating story, and once you get going to archives, the interest and the information that we hold is absolutely brilliant. I'm not going to say too much because I'm sure 1 or 2 questions might come out, but I would like to say to you, if you could take back to the volunteers and the staff that have kept us going through COVID, being able to support people who've wanted to use the archive services, and thank them and wish them a Merry Christmas from the committee here, please. I would appreciate that. So I've got to perform properly today as chairman, so I am going to propose the recommendations. So the first recommendation is be informed of the statutory archive responsibilities of the County Council. And number two, the recommendation is to note the comparative performance of the archive service. So I propose that formally and ask for a seconder, please.
Happy to second that, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Guilfoyle.
Thank you. That was an excellent presentation, Ruth, into the service. I think anyone who is listening to that will get a real understanding of what's available for people and how you preserve things. I think probably as you get older, you start to look back a little bit more, don't you? Want to preserve those memories. And one of the questions that I was going to ask was about the pandemic, because it is one of the most significant things that we've had, well, obviously this century as such. And clearly I was wondering what we were doing to record that and to save, you know, even silly things like masks and things like that we've got now. I suppose in another couple of 100 years, people will be going, well, why were they wearing things like that? You know, we've got this now. And also the other thing, because I was going to suggest, actually I got it, you know, to suggest, and I did actually speak to Adrian when we had the briefing about it, saying, were we doing anything where we were encouraging people, in particular schools as well, where we encourage them to make, you know, notes of their memories, could we not run something through Inspire that sort of got that got even, you know, children's memories. And I know from when I was walking in workshop with, and I'm always bad at names, but the manager from the library was walking, he was on a break, and I was speaking to him, and at the time a couple of ladies who I know came by, elderly ladies, who were talking to us about how they had missed the library during its closure and how big an impact that had on them, because that's where they used to go every day. And just those types of interactions and things that could be, you know, recorded and saved, and how we get them. Now, I didn't know whether we could sponsor, John, through the committee, something like that, you know, so that we got it, you know. And I know the lottery did a lot of funding around after the mining community was closing down. I know a lot of my colleagues came in and worked with the archive service to write some books about the history of their local pits, and I think you can find probably now there's probably an history on every pit that's been done locally by individuals that worked at that pit. And I know that they went into the archives to get some of those photographs, etc., that were done on pits and had been saved. But I'm just wondering, as I say, whether we could start something through, because it wouldn't cost a great deal to do that, but commission something now, so that, you know, we have got that record, and well, hopefully that, you know, it's gone within the last bit, and we can sort of say, well, it was here for 18 months, 2 years, and gone, but it has had a significant impact. The other one was about, such as boots. You know, when you talked about rally, I mean, we used to have a rally factory in Worksop, and I'm sure you've got a lot of detail around that. And boots has had a significant impact on Nottinghamshire and Nottingham, and I just wondered whether we'd approached them or they'd approached us and we'd got anything from their archives at all. Because again, you know, and any other significant employers, how do we encourage them to come forward to say, well, we could keep that collection for you, and it will be there, you know, for families, friends and relatives of people who've worked in those industries to go back and have a look. But thank you, it's really good.
I'm going to pass straight back to Ruth to let her come back with some of those answers. I think we do have other businesses, etc., in Nottinghamshire with their archives in our archives, but I will hand back to Ruth. Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you, Chair. The Boots company does have its own archive at its main site near Clifton Bridge, and we do work with that archive, and we have facilitated the archivists there giving talks throughout the library service to talk about that particular business. We are very good at liaising with solicitors firms and having so you've got copies of title deeds, etc. for properties, and we also have collections from the old John Player factory business, which was obviously very well, it was very prominent, particularly in Nottingham, and we have quite a lot of records from the old National Coal Board as well, and there were a large series of photographs of the actual mines themselves, both surface and underground. So it can be the main barrier we have is people not knowing archives exist. So that's the first barrier that we're working very hard to overcome, and we have had an enormous amount of collections coming in since we've reopened. You know, it's increased to 300%. There's actually a huge amount coming through, particularly from individuals as well. So we are doing the best that we can to get all of the relevant records in. If ever you hear of an archive that might be useful, please point them in our direction, because word of mouth is definitely one of the best ways of advertising what we do.
Thanks, Ruth. And I think your suggestion on the COVID thing is something to have a look at as we go forward, Glyn. So I don't think there's a problem with that. Are you okay now? Move on to Sue Saddington, Councillor Saddington. Thank you,
Chairman. Firstly, I think that was an excellent presentation. I really do. And when it came to the fact that you are recording the pandemic, that too is wonderful. I mean, none of us sitting in this room today, or even in this country, will ever forget what it's been like living through the pandemic. But probably however many years on from now, and there'll probably be in another one by then, but people will not understand just how dreadful it's been for people to be shut into their homes, not able to go out, frightened to go out, and frightened to go out now they're able to do, because it's like being released but not daring to go out. I think Glyn made a good point about Boots. Boots are doing a huge amount of injecting, and I would have thought that they could have brought something together to say what it's been like, having people into the chemists, how they've had to queue, how they've had to have their jab, how they've had to sit there afterwards, etc., because in years to come people won't remember. And the other thing is, Ruth said about making people aware of the archives. Do we go into schools and make this aware that they can go to the archives for visits? Is that something we do? Because it starts with children, and they can see their past, and obviously, clearly, take part in what's happening now in the future. But it was a very, very interesting talk, so thank you for that, Ruth.
my wife's a teacher, and I know she does use archives for some of the information that they do, yeah. But again, I'm going to let the person who's got the knowledge, Ruth, answer that.
Oh, thank you, Chair. We don't do as much work with schools as we'd like to, but we have got big plans for next year. Before the pandemic, we did have groups of school children coming in, particularly from local schools, because obviously one of the main issues is the expense of getting the children to the facilities. We have worked with our colleagues in Inspire's arts and culture team to engage very young children via the use of artists who are interpreting some of our archives. We have recently had some funding from the National Archives, which I'm discussing with Peter, etc., what the proposals, but we would like to use possibly some of that money to work with our education library service, who are an easy in to the schools, so that we can work and see what offer will work best to reach as many schools as we possibly can.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. Any other questions? Yep. Yep. Bless you.
I have read something where children have written down that they have their feelings through the pandemic, that they've felt frightened, they've felt trapped, they've felt lonely because they haven't seen their friends, etc., etc. And I think that's important, to catch what their thoughts have been through the pandemic.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Sue. I think that's something that can be taken on board, I think, Ruth, can't it, as we go forward?
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Garner.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I make a suggestion that this committee goes round the archives and has a viewing when we out of the pandemic, I suppose?
Yeah, we're meant to be going after this meeting, but we have cancelled it because of the situation we are. So we were going after this meeting.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Didn't you get an email?
I probably didn't see it, mate.
Okay, don't worry. So we're
I've been
going
before, though, anyway. It's good.
We're going to invade Ruth in the new year. So I'm looking forward to going down to have a look, because some of the stuff there is, you know, really brilliant. Okay, we'll move to the vote then. Are we happy to approve the recommendations? Please show. Those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Peter. Merry Christmas and see you next year.
Thank you, Chair. Merry Christmas to
Cheers.
everyone.
Thank you. Okay, item 5. It's on the back of page 4. So it's the Community's Performance Report for Quarter 2, 2021-22, Place Court data set. Derek, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. You'll be familiar with the kind of content and format of this report by now. You'll have received it previously, and as the Chairman suggested, this report provides an update of our financial performance and our service performance for the second quarter of 2021-22, and provides some kind of performance highlights and updates across the service areas that fall within the remit of this committee. Happy to take any questions that members may have on either the report or the appendices. It's worth noting as well, however, that now that the Council's plan has been adopted, reporting arrangements for the financial year 22-23 will start to change in terms of how they're reported to committee, and of course we'll use the content of the council plan to drive that performance reporting that will then come back into committee, because that will represent the council's priorities for the next few years. Thank you,
Derek. The recommendation is on page 15 of the agenda pack, and it's one recommendation. Note the performance information on the Council Services for Communities Committee for the period 1st of July to the 30th of September 2021. I propose that. Ask for a seconder, please.
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you very much. Anybody wish to speak, please? Councillor Guilfoyle. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just the anomaly of the registration service with a forecasting and an underspend of 313. I was just looking at it thinking I would have expected it the other way on. And I just wondered why. Is it because I'll answer my own question. Is it because the registrars are not directly employed by us? We pay for them as and when they do their service. So that money is, or can Rob illuminate the issue for us?
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Guilfoyle, for the question. The underspend that's being generated in the current financial year in the registration service arises primarily from the dramatically increased number of wedding ceremonies over the summer months. Obviously, many couples had waited a very long time for their wedding ceremonies, and they did want to have enhanced ceremonies, and we were able to service that. We had an increased number of bookings over the summer, and indeed the bookings are very healthy for next summer. That is the prime reason why there is an underspend being forecast in registration at the moment.
Thanks, Rob. Okay, Glyn? Okay, thank you. Councillor Wheeler, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of points. First one, the libraries. So just wondering, with the obviously the massive uptake in online catalogue visits, which is good to see, and obviously we know that primarily that will be down to COVID, but I would imagine that high amount of visits is going to stay, perhaps not those levels, but when people start to realise it's online and it's more convenient for them to be going more. Are we confident we've got the resource to manage that going forwards and to making sure that obviously as much content as possible online, but also the work behind the scenes infrastructure for that to keep going, probably expanding in the next few years? Then I've got a second point, Chairman. Don't we come to second do it together or yeah? And second one, just on the training standards. So point 17 about the work being done with the hairdressers and bar, which is great to see. I just think when we have this information, if councillors can have that information shared to them as well. A lot of us are on local social media groups and community groups where we share things, and I think putting that out there for people to be aware of scams in a particular area, but also to obviously let vulnerable people know that they will know in the community could only be a benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. Derek, do you want to direct them to the officers, or are you happy to answer those? I think. Oh yes, sorry, Peter. That big picture on the screen. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. In terms of Inspire's capacity around the online offer, our position at the moment is that yes, demand is although it's eased off a little bit, it's kind of still at this, quite an accelerated, elevated level rather. Compared to pre-pandemic. So we're kind of just reviewing that. So we had a review meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to keep everything in place to see how things develop. I think there is a resource and a cost issue. So the cost of loaning an item, a physical book item, in terms of the cost of the book, nationally is assessed at being about 15 pence a book. An electronic book, it's about 70 to 80 pence a book because of licensing and the cost of e-learn. So it's an expensive option. So we've got a bit of a challenge of how we spend the book fund allocation because really high demand on e-books, so long waiting lists. So we're having that internal discussion, and there's a discussion nationally in terms of relationship with e-book publishers. In UK is one of the most expensive place to buy ebooks by public library services. So there's an awareness nationally to do some work around that. So there is a kind of tension and a challenge in that. And in the unlikely event that the county council is going to increase funding towards the book fund, that's something that we're trying to manage within that. But the information that we and the online package that we're putting together is also funded through our learning ESFA funding and our Arts Council funding. So that enables us to provide quite a rich package of online offer. So I suppose to answer the question precisely, we are continuing to develop that offer and meeting demand.
Thanks, Peter. Are you okay with that, Jonathan? Right. Thanks, Mark, for popping up.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Councillor Wheeler. Yeah, I'll take that away. I'll speak to Fiona Needham, who's currently heading up the training standards part of the service. I think that's a really useful suggestion there to share that scam information with local members. So I'll take that one away if I may. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, we'll go to the vote then, please. All those in favour of the recommendation, please show. Thank you. That's unanimous. Item 6 is the approval of applications to the COVID Partnership Social Recovery Fund and the Community Hub Plan. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Chair. So members will recall from previous committee meetings approving the establishment of the two funds. Hopefully also members will also recall the partnership process by which projects have been identified and brought forward for approval. Applications for over 5,000 for both the funds, approval is via this committee. Applications for under 5,000 can be approved by members of the Local Resilience Forum Humanitarian Assistance Group and then brought to this committee for oversight. So in Appendix 1, you've got details of those projects that have been reviewed and endorsed by this partnership for over 5,000, but brought here today for approval. And there's a total of 610,182 for the Social Recovery Fund, 282,817 for the Food Fund. And then in Appendix 2, we've got the details of projects 5,000 or under that have already been approved. And today we've got 8,280 of food plan fund approvals. If all applications over 5,000 are approved today, that means for the Social Recovery Fund, we would have spent a total of 916,000 of the £1 million. And for the Food Plan Fund, about 345 of the 800,000. And with the Social Recovery Fund, we've already got a further 145,000 of applications that we've received too, that are currently being looked at, have been received. So given that the Social Recovery Fund is drawing to a close, it's proposed that an evaluation of the awards is undertaken to assess the impacts of the funds that have already gone out already, and to also identify any gaps that may remain. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. The recommendations on page 23. Number 1, approve the applications for funding recommended in Appendix A of the report. Number 2 is reviews and endorses those applications that have already received partnership approval as set out in Appendix 2 of the report. And number 3, approves officers to undertake an evaluation of the COVID-19 Social Recovery Fund. I propose those recommendations. A seconder, please. Thank you.
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Adams, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I just want to put my backing to this and say that the Netherfield Forum's receipt of 49,910 is very welcome for them. I got a very nice email when they seen this in the papers coming forward, and they were really excited about receiving the money. They've put a lot of time and effort. Lots of volunteers have helped them convert a GP surgery, an old GP surgery, which is right next door to the existing St George's Centre in Netherfield, into a facility for young people, as well as office space and things like that. And they're renting it out also in their other site upstairs for businesses to do business meetings and things like that, smaller businesses that need access to presentation space. It's a really, really good facility. And the lady Tina that actually organises it all, administrates it all, is doing a phenomenal job. So this money will go a very long way to helping them take that forward, and yeah, very much welcome it, and thank you very much, and I hope everybody votes for it today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chairman. Just the same vein as Councillor Adams, just to really welcome the fund. It can make a huge difference. So, for example, there's one of the groups in my area, So A Day, who are putting together at the moment boxes for homeless and vulnerable people. Over 1,300 shoeboxes filled with items on Saturday. I was there volunteering. That's going to make a real difference to people. And this funding can make a difference to these organisations being able to get out to more people. So I think, again, joining Councillor Adams and hoping everyone votes for this today, because it's a really useful fund and just shows a difference we can make here to a lot of people's lives through these groups. And obviously put on record, appreciation to all the groups who are out there doing the fantastic work, especially this time of year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wish to speak? Do you want to come up? Any comments coming back, Mark, or are you okay with that?
No, that all sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move to the vote then. Those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you. Item 7 is the Nottinghamshire Household Support Fund progress. It's the Mark show. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so just 2 seconds. So, yeah, members will recall the urgent paper that brought to committee last time round regarding the £5.6 million of funding to deploy the Household Support Fund in the county. This paper sets out the approach that we've taken with partners, and also the progress that we've made to deploy the funding. You'll see in there that there's a proposal. We temporarily recruited to a team of 5 FTE roles. The report seeks approval to establish those roles until the end of March, which is the end of the funding period. We launched the food and energy and the other essentials part of the scheme on the 15th of November, as we said we were aiming to. And the report sets out that it's been a phased launch of that particular part, and we've been bringing on more assessor organisations. And over that period, as we've been doing that, the volume of awards have been increasing. As an update on the report, in terms of funding deployed so far, we've now sent out £1.92 million of vouchers for food, for holidays for those entitled to free school meals. That's October, it was 839,000 in the end, and December we've sent out 985,000. With regards to food and other energy and other essentials, as at the 13th of December, we'd allocated out a total of 92,620, split between just under 60,000 for food and 33,000 for energy. And I believe there was a further 11,000 awarded yesterday. So you can see that that part of the scheme is now sort of picking up and accelerating. So we've spent just over £2 million out of the fund so far. The focus at the moment is to iron out some teething problems we've had with some of the vouchers, and also to get a system up and running to be able to support those in need who pay for their energy by direct debit. We've got an issue around that at the moment that we're working on. And also the latest sort of development, I guess, is just to flag up that we're looking perhaps to design in some resource to deal with those who people out there who are self-referring. So to undertake assessments on those people that aren't known to the County Council, District Borough Council colleagues or Citizens Advice Bureau. Conversations are ongoing with that, but we may need to increase the size of the County Council team in order to deal with that. And say conversations are happening this morning with partners around that. And the last thing to say, I guess, that following the meetings this morning, we're finalising a document today for committee members on how they can refer people in for support, and we will be sharing that later on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. I'd like to propose the recommendations, there are 5 on page 36 of the agenda pack. 1, ratifies the Household Support Fund design and progress made to deploy the fund as set out in the report. 2, ratifies the recruitment of 5 FTE temporary posts within the Trading Standards and Community Service to administer delivery of the fund. 3, approves the continuation of the temporary posts until the end of March 2022. 4, approves the use of £64,900 of the fund to cover the 5 FTE posts. And number 5, agrees to a further report to be taken to the committee's January 2022 meeting to update and ratify further the development of the scheme. So I'll propose that recommendation. Do I have a seconder, please?
Second that, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Guilford.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, support both the papers. I mean, we're talking here, if you put both papers together, over £6.2 million of support that is going out to the Nottinghamshire community. My concern is that when we get to March, we haven't got that 6.2 million, to my knowledge, that's there. But that need will still be there. This isn't just a COVID issue. Child poverty and household poverty will still continue. Rising energy costs, we know, everybody will be looking at their electricity and their gas bills, or even when you go, although I don't drive, but I did go with my wife the other day who nearly bust a gut when she knew how much it was going to cost her to fill the car up. Energy prices are going up. And I just wondered what, if we'd heard anything from government or anything else, if there are schemes like this and grants going to be available for the ensuing year. Because, as I say, this isn't just a COVID issue. It's just the fact that COVID has driven people to think about it a little bit more, I believe. This poverty will still be there with a lot of the pools. And also, with the school meals that we've been given, that issue won't go away. What is going to go away is the ability to fund that if government don't give us sufficient grants. This county council cannot raise that type of money by increasing the precept in any way, shape or form. So, what is going to be done? Because I'm sure that, there are other councils who have got similar problems. And as I say, it's not going away.
Thank you. Derek, do you want to come back? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Guilford. I mean, as far as future funding is concerned for 22-23 and beyond, we're not cited on any current government plans around that at the moment. As we do become cited, if there are new funding intentions, we'll obviously be able to bring them in front of committee. And of course, we're in a particular moment of the pandemic right now, where it's difficult to see what the likely impact will be on society over the coming weeks and months. So there may be some movement there, but we don't know. What I would say is, as far as the Social Recovery Fund is concerned, so that's the funding covered in the previous report that Mark talked about. Obviously, a lot of that funding has been put in place to support local community groups to put in place longer term support arrangements for communities. So whilst the money might have been spent in the current year, its impact will hopefully strengthen our community and voluntary infrastructure for much longer periods than that. So there will be longevity to that funding, even if it is spent in the current year. I think it's also worth reflecting on the point Mark made right at the end there in terms of his input, that we're going to review our expenditure, the allocations that we've made, the impact of those allocations, and any gaps that we can identify, either on a geographical basis or in terms of the different parts of the communities that we're trying to support and that need our support the most. And that will be something that we'll be able to bring back to this committee, along with a consideration of where we might be able to potentially further invest in community support in the future. And of course, at the moment, we've also got the Local Communities Fund that has been opened up for local voluntary and community groups to apply for as well. And whilst that is not directly COVID related, of course, there is an overlap, certainly for some parts of the voluntary and community sector, that will be applying for funds now.
Thanks, Derek. Okay, Glenn. Yep.
Well, I understand, you know, as you say, a lot of the stuff that's gone in the first report is about, when you look through it, it's about infrastructure and it's about sustainability or setting up schemes which, you know, hopefully will be able to provide some. But there is still, you know, there's still the other side where there is a substantial amount of money, is about providing the wherewithal for people. And if that's not there, it doesn't matter what infrastructure you've got. If you haven't got that ability to be able to provide those goods and services, then you know, we're going to be in a really difficult position. And to be honest, just on child poverty, I've not really seen a meaningful report come through on child poverty across Nottinghamshire. And I just wondered whether it's that also ought to be looked at relative to where we are at the moment, so that we actually do know the full state of play within the locality.
Okay, thanks, Lynn. We take that away. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chairman. I think just again to welcome the amount of work that's going in, especially on the with both funds going on together, as Councillor Guilford said. I think just going back to the point I made earlier around communication as well, it's really crucial that we get this message out, what we're doing, especially around you know, to councils to put around again social media groups, but also various people that know in the community who need that support, but to really put that message across to our comms team to get it out far and wide. And I think on the point about future planning, obviously, again, we'll hold to the government, I know, on a lot of funding, but I think good work being done recently, seen like the MP in Ashfield, you know, around cooking on a budget, and also I know Marcus Rashford and Tom Kerridge recently, and sort of budgeting groups, putting that key information out there as well on a regular basis to people. Because I can give an example. I remember a staff who works for me, you know, on just above minimum wage, you know, but we worked out that she was spending 14% of her weekly wage on takeaway drinks. But she didn't realise that, didn't want to budget just for a few quid every day. So we said, I'll just try for a week, you know, in terms of make a drink at home, take a takeaway cup. And she absolutely the same thing now, and that money in the pocket to spend on basically that they're struggling with. And I think it's just not, I'm not highlighting that case to say she was wrong or didn't understand it, but just because you've never had to properly budget, or you weren't learning that at school and perhaps not had that support at home to realise you can do that by some of those conversations. I know there's a lot of groups out there who do that. So if we can share that information out there to try and help people to do what they can as well in terms of with the funding coming in. We know the funding's not going to happen forever. It's just not going to. So anything we can do to help give education to people and know that they've got support groups out there, citizens advice, etc., other groups out there do a great job, then hopefully we can encourage people to know that's out there and do what they can, as well as giving support from our end. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Wheeler. I think that moves on to a point that I was going to make myself, in the sense of, I had a resident from the north of the county contact me this week, struggling to find out who could support them. They phoned the county council phone line, and the answers they were given didn't help them. So they rang me directly because they found out who I was. I've passed that on to officers now, and I think we just need to make sure that and I'm not being critical of the people answering our phones for us, but it's a question I'm going to ask of the officers: that do our call centre have the right information to be able to point these people in the right direction that come to us? So, I mean, I've passed one on already, and I think that's in process. So I'm not concerned that that's not going to happen, but somebody might not have been briefed and didn't know the answer when they replied to this gentleman at the time. So I think it is about making sure that people do know. So, okay. Oh, anything else? Anybody else? Okay, let's go to the vote then. Those in favour of the recommendations, please show. Thank you. Unanimous. Item 8 is update on key emergency planning matters. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. I'll just highlight some of the key points from the report you have before you today. The purpose of the report is to update the committee on recent key activities and events in the work of the emergency planning team. Members will appreciate that this has been dominated by COVID-19 and the work the team has been doing to support the work of the County Council and the Local Resilience Forum. And part of that has been the facilitation of the meetings of the Local Resilience Forum's Tactical Coordinating Group, which is chaired by the County Council's Director of Public Health, Jonathan Gribbin. And that group met this morning, a full hour-and-a-half meeting of intense discussions to coordinate the multi-agency response to COVID. The emergency planning team will be facilitating the LRF local authorities cell meeting that happens this afternoon, again to galvanise support for the NHS. So that COVID activity continues to dominate the work of the team. But as the report highlights, work has continued to ensure that all key statutory duties and critical commitments are also fulfilled. And the report highlights the work on, for example, reservoir emergency plans that arise from the experience of the Todbrook Reservoir incident in Derbyshire in 2019. So that work has continued. The report also highlights that, of course, other emergencies will occur, and the report talks in particular about winter weather, cold weather alerts. The Met Office and the Department of Health issue cold weather alerts, and the emergency planning team promulgate those to relevant teams across all departments. We also have a four-wheel drive vehicle plan, so if we do have a period of ice and snow, that can be invoked to assist social care and other services to fulfill their normal functions. And of course, flooding is always going to be a focus of attention at any time of the year. The report highlights that early preparations have begun for a major flood exercise to take place in 2022 to rehearse our preparedness for future flood events. The report also highlights the work we've been doing with the Environment Agency and the Fire Service to train flood wardens. And the report highlights one particular event in Burton, Joyce and Stoke Bardolph in October. That was an in-person event, face-to-face event. It was attended by Councillor Adams and by Tom Randall MP. And the session included presentations on the core principles of being a flood warden and the roles and responsibilities and the hazards and the precautions that need to be taken. Now, under current COVID precautions, we are not able to offer that training in person. However, we can offer virtual events using MS Teams. And that is what's happening tomorrow evening. We'll be taking the same training to be presented in a virtual presentation to volunteers in Shire Oaks and Rhodesia in an event promoted by Councillor Fielding. The report also highlights that there have been other emergencies as well as COVID-19 and business continuity challenges. In September, there were issues in the national commercial fuel supply system. Immediate demand for fuel outstripped the short-term supply chain capacity. And so there were shortages at filling station forecourts. So the County Council's Risk, Safety and Emergency Management Board and the Local Resilience Forum's Tactical Coordination Group both activated in response. Fortunately, in that incident, the issues were short-lived. If fuel supply issues had persisted for a longer period, then there are national contingency plans that could have been invoked that would have enabled critical public services to access fuel from priority sites. And finally, if I may, I'll just highlight that under safety at sports grounds, the Sports Grounds Safety Authority have concluded an audit of our functions. And as the report details, the outcome was that the maximum score possible was awarded in 8 out of 9 areas of inspection, and only 1 point was lost in respect of the safety certification aspect. And so from the Sports Ground Safety Authority's perspective, Nottingham performed tremendously well, and we are low risk in terms of their criteria. I should also add that, of course, we are supporting Nottingham Forest Football Club at the moment because, of course, they are affected by the COVID passport requirements that were agreed in Parliament yesterday. And we will be monitoring their work to fulfil their duties in that respect. Those are the key points, Chairman. I shall be pleased to take any questions members may have.
Thank you very much. The recommendation on page 51 is number 1. Commends the work undertaken by the emergency planning team as detailed in the report. And number 2, agrees to receive a further update on the key activities of the team. So I propose that recommendation. Seconder, please.
Second that, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Councillor Guilfoyle.
Thank you, Chairman. Just like to join with you in the report congratulating Rob and his team on the hard work that they have done, and in particular when we know also that they've not been really topped up with staff either, that they've managed to do that work and also with some managers not being present. Just on that bit, because that has always been a concern of mine, Chairman, that the reduction that did take place, and that that was a budgetary decision. I never agreed with it. I said it should have remained in situ. Seeing that we've still not been possible to attract applicants for 2 fixed-term positions, and I know there's sort of difficulty out there in getting people are saying out there it's difficult to recruit currently. But I just wondered whether we'd also, for the longer term, thought about graduates again for these posts and or apprenticeships. Because I think the emergency planning it's a key service. It's not going to go away. It may have lulls from time to time, which doesn't make Rob a very happy person, because I know that he likes plenty to be doing and things going off. That's what he's sort of trained for. But I think for our sustainability of the organisation, I think that we ought to consider looking at those 2 aspects to support Rob. And I'm sure, for a graduate, we would get some people coming forward who were graduates who could be trained up and would be and get probably some of the best training in the country from Rob. And I think that would be worthwhile. The other thing, Chairman, just looking at the reservoir issue, Rob, which is again another new duty that is sort of dropped upon you. And obviously there's a new reservoir at Loudham going to be sort of completed, but also I just wondered whether there is any impact on any of our borders that could affect Nottinghamshire, because clearly I know there's some reservoirs not too far away from Shire Oaks and places that sort of serve the Ryton and everything. But I wondered if that's taken into account as well, where we're not directly responsible for that, but actually the impact of something happen could actually come in onto Nottinghamshire's borders. And I wonder what we've sort of put in place for that, and if there's some cross-border discussion around that takes place. That's it, Chair.
Thanks, Lynn. I'll go back to Rob if he'd like to come in. I think there's some positiveness there coming. Thank you. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Guilfoyle, for those two questions. Certainly on the first one, in terms of recruitment, we were disappointed not to be able to attract applicants, appointable applicants, to the fixed-term vacancies. We did, however, attract a very good candidate who's now in post to the emergency planning officer post. We had an individual with substantial experience and of working not just in this area but also in Derbyshire. So I'm delighted that that vacancy was filled. We are proposing to re-advertise and more particularly also try to attract secondments into the emergency planning team. But I do certainly take your point in respect to graduates. We will pursue that. And I've seen firsthand the value of apprentices in the registration service. So we will take your suggestion, Councillor Guilfoyle, and have a look at those avenues too. With regard to reservoirs, and I think most pertinently from your comments, we are very linked into the reservoirs in Derbyshire and the work of the Derbyshire Local Resilience Forum in mapping what becomes of water if there is a reservoir failure in Derbyshire. The modelling suggests that the water in the worst case scenario, water will find its way ultimately into the River Trent. And so the impacts that we would see in Nottinghamshire from a catastrophic event in a reservoir in Derbyshire, worst case scenario, we will be seeing flooding from the Trent that will be akin to the sort of flooding we are planned for and prepared for from the River Trent for other forms of flooding from rainfall and so on. So we would have advance notice that the water was heading our way, and we would know where to expect flooding to occur because it would be from the into the River Trent. But again, it's something we will continue to keep in touch with Derbyshire colleagues on that question. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Councillor Adams, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just to refer back to Rob's point about their visit in the LRF training, which was delivered at our local community centre. It was a really great session, and we had a lot of interest. And it's something that we've. Well, I think I seem to feel like I've been talking about flooding for a long time in Burton Joyce, because we had a lot of off small stream issues rather than sort of the River Trent problems have been solved a number of years ago with a lot of the work that was done to deal with that, a lot of the pumps and that sort of thing. But we have had quite a lot of events sort of in the past 5 years where the small streams have sort of breached and flooded a few houses. So we've had a real interest in the village and Stoke Bardolph as well, which loses its road access during these same flooding events, to come along and do it. And the response and the feedback we had was fantastic. People felt they'd learnt a lot. And I can only highly recommend it to anybody that has got any sort of flooding issues in their own areas to get in contact with Rob's team and make this happen, because it really gives them a better overall understanding from all perspectives, whether it be from the fire service or it be from ourselves as the county council, And I think when people can understand it better, you know, I think when these flooding events happen, they're less fearful as well, which I think is a really positive thing. So yeah, just thanks ever so much again, Rob, for all your team's efforts. And yeah, as I say, Burton Joyce and Stoke Bardolph have now got their own group. So off we go. Hopefully we'll be able to deal with those things better in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Wheeler, and then I'll come back to you, Robert, after that, if that's okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to touch on the apprenticeships and graduates, because it's under my portfolio at the council. I think just to say, if any department, especially if Rob's in there, feel the need, they're supposed to filling, so feed that through to Jill and to Marge, because it's something that we're really pushing as a council to hire more apprentice graduates. It's obviously not as easy as it looks to recruit, especially at the moment there is there's more vacancies for apprentice graduates than you can fill across every sector, not just ourselves, but particular departments do feel that we benefit. Please feed that through. And I know that Jill Marge will be speaking to Director, I'm sure Adrian will fly the flag for that as well, to make sure the funding comes there, as other departments have, and I'll absolutely support from mine as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Wheeler. Do you want to just come back on, close off, Rob? Anything to add?
Only to thank members for those kind comments, and assure you we will follow up those avenues I've discussed, and I look forward to reporting back to committee in due course.
Very much. Okay, anybody else? No? We'll go to the vote then. Those in favour, please show. Thank you. Unanimous. Item 9 is the work programme. Anybody, any comments or questions for the work programme? No, thank you. Just before I close the meeting, I'd like to say thank you very much to you all for your participation in the committee since the May election, and also to wish you all a Merry Christmas and have a nice break. All the best. Thank you.